Hey everybody, I have a sponsor. It is Sagen Financial Group. They have this product called Relax Tax by Sagen Financial Group. And what you do is you submit your tax info online and it gets processed by one of their specialists. No unnecessary appointments, no calls unless you request one, completely on your schedule. And best of all, the listeners of the KAAMP get a 10% off uh, code for Relax Tax by Sagan Financial Group. Just go to relaxtax.com. That is RELAXEDTAX.com and use coupon code KAAMP in the tax client intake form. Sagen Financial Group is in Chattanooga and they serve all 50 states. And part of the proceeds will go to directly supporting the KAAMP podcast. And I think that's awesome. So I'll put the link in the show notes. Just remember the KAAMP is your coupon code for 10% off for the Relax Tax by Sagen Financial Group. Also, thank you for listening, and I really appreciate it.
Sometimes, but mostly I dig it.
So Knoxville treats you pretty well as a creative person living here now?
Yeah. I've been here since 2016. I moved here after spending 2 years in Maine. But before that, I was in Atlanta for 17 years. So I went to college in Atlanta, went to Georgia State University, actually studied music there. I played music professionally for a few years, and then I was totally burnt out with music.
What'd you play?
I play guitar. I don't really play much anymore, but
For obvious reasons.
yeah, I mean, I kind of get all of my artistic creative energy out making physical things now, and it fits me a little bit better, and it took me a long time to sort of come to terms with that, because I mean, I think that a lot of people who are creative types, artists or craftspeople, will probably recognize this. When you tell everyone that you know that you're doing something, they want you to succeed in that, but you also become that thing. So if you're a songwriter or guitarist or whatever, like, especially I think when you're young, like, I'm going to school for music. I've got this gig.
Yeah.
I've releasing this album or whatever. And it's like everybody's cheering you on, but you also become like a kind of like fixture in people's minds. Like, oh, that's who this dude is. And so when you're like, in a way, incentivized not to change paths or something, or like confuses people a little bit. Like, oh, well, I thought you were a guitar player. Like,
Yeah.
Why are you studying woodworking? So, but I was just totally burned out on being a professional musician because I dropped out of college because I was playing full time. And after a few years of doing that and trying to go to school, I was like, well, why am I accruing debt?
Something's got to give somewhere.
When I don't have time to do both of these things well, but I know that I can do the thing that I came here to do well already, and the thing that will make me better is doing it more. So I dropped out of school, played professionally for several years, got really sick of the hustle of being a professional musician and like how that made me feel about the creative part of it. So I did an about face, or just kind of like pieced out for a year, and I went and studied wooden boat building up in Maine. And then moved back to Atlanta, worked a couple woodworking jobs, and then very randomly fell into video production.
That's a jump.
Yeah, through a friend. It wasn't really that. In a way, it's less than a jump from music to woodworking because I had recorded music before, and I had awareness of the software and the sort of workflow, which is not so completely alien to go to from recording audio to recording video or
Mm-hmm.
editing video. And I ended up working a lot recording sound for video, and I did that for like 10 years. Um, and it was through a friend's company who had also gone to music school, so we had like a similar frame of reference. He ended up in video through film scoring. So yeah, and it paid a lot better than being a woodworker or a musician. But I also got burned on out on that because I was doing a lot of time in front of a computer. And Atlanta, I kind of like got a little sick of Atlanta because it was blowing up, prices were going up, cost of living was going up, population was going up. And so at that point, I moved back to Maine for 2 years and tried that out. And then I liked it, but it was a little too sleepy in terms of social scene up there. Maine is amazing. I go back probably about once a year, but I didn't want to live there full time, which took me a couple years to figure out. And then Knoxville was sort of plan B of escaping Atlanta. So I ended up in Knoxville in late 2016, and just kind of never looked back. And it's been a good move. So cost of living is pretty low here, although it is also going up. But
Yep.
I'm pretty lucky in that regard. Like I've been able to, keep it pretty close to what it was in 2016, and that allows me to be a full-time woodworker and artist and take some risks on what kind of projects I do and be a little selective on the kind of projects I take. And so there are woodworkers I know in town who work a whole lot more than I do, because I'm pretty picky about the jobs that I take. And I could make a lot more money, I think, if I did other kinds of work than I do, but
That doesn't.
that's
It
just
doesn't.
never going to work for
Yeah.
me. Like I'm going to,
That doesn't scratch the itch.
no, it doesn't. And worse than not, there's like a whole list of, there are trickle down effects for me, of something really not, something being, um, uninteresting or not engaging for me. If the thing that I'm doing doesn't, grab me in some sort of deep way, I'll get the job done, but like I'll
It's
be
not the same.
miserable and I
Yeah.
won't hustle for the work, and you know, it's
It
just
becomes a chore.
it becomes a
Yeah.
chore, and I don't want to live that way. So
So you don't do those jobs.
so I don't do those jobs.
So what jobs do you do?
So I take commissions.
Which you did most recently the Chalk Walk Awards, right?
I did those,
Yeah.
yeah, for Dogwood Arts. This is the second year I've done those. I do a little bit of everything, but I do some of the kinds of things that most custom woodworkers do. Like I take furniture commissions. Um, the things I don't do are like interior trim carpentry and like home building, and the things that like fall more under the carpentry category. I've done that stuff in the past.
So you try to stay away from the industrial stuff.
Industrial and residential interiors, like built-in cabinets and kitchens and closet renovations and like all that kind of stuff. Like there are a lot of people who that's all they do, and I've done it before, and I've done it working for other people before, but it doesn't really interest me. So the things that interest me the most are uh, artwork, furniture, home decor, sort of standalone pieces that are statement pieces that originate with with my personal sort of creative interests and vision. So furniture, um, that could be anything really. Coffee tables, beds, vanities, chairs, tables, whatever. But I don't want to copy people's work. I don't want to be handed a page from a CB2 or Pottery Barn catalog and told to,
Hey, can you make something like
can
that?
you make this, but can you make it black and 4 inches longer? Or
Yeah.
like, we want this, but with a mirror. It's like, well, yeah, you
Find
should
somebody else.
just buy it from CB2. Like, if you want, you know what I mean? If you want this style, they copied it from somebody else. They probably copied it from like a Danish guy in the mid 20th century. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I totally get it, because I can't afford to hire. So, if I wanted a bed, I mean, forget that I'm a woodworker, but if I wanted like a very specific custom bed frame or something, I would not be able to hire me to do that. Um, I would look at those catalogs. I would probably end up finding the most attractive, non-stupid thing I could find at IKEA. I mean, it's like the terrible. That's just the way things are. So, I mean, if I were rich, I would hire somebody like me to do that thing.
Right.
Or it's not even rich. There are people who are not like rich who still go looking for authentic, original work, and it might be a once in a decade purchase for them. But there are people like me and like Josh Shorey, who we were talking about earlier, out there who can make something really special for you that um says something about your life and who you are, but also originates in their personal vision of the world. So those are the kind of things that I want to do. Um, and it's slowly snowballing to the point where I can take mostly those kind of jobs and do less things like I don't know. I'm trying to think of the last. I don't want to name any names. The last like commission I did. Okay, I did I did a couple years ago. I did a coffee table for somebody in Fourth and Gill,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a beautiful coffee table, and it was an original design, but it was definitely sort of me putting on a creative costume. She wanted something that would fit with all of her other, like her mix of mid-century modern and traditional American furniture and stuff.
And that's not the standalone kind of thing you enjoy doing.
It was generic enough that, like, okay, so it was nice enough. Like, I was happy with the design. It turned out really well. It looked good in her home. She was really happy.
So it checks all the
It
boxes
checks all the
that
boxes. Like,
way.
I can't be unhappy about that. At the same time, if I lived in that house and I was like, I really need a coffee table, and I happen to right now have the time and money to make one for myself, it's not the coffee table that I would have made.
Right.
That is the kind of job that I want, though. Someone says, like, we want you to make a piece of furniture for us, and we're gonna give you carte blanche. Like, this is our budget, or like this is sort of our range of what we want to spend, and we really like your work. Um, if you already had something that filled the functional role of this thing, we would just buy it from you. So what kind of coffee table would you make for
Mm-hmm.
us? And that that's like that's a pretty ideal job in terms of functional work. And then in terms of artwork and decor, um, I make a range of things from small, uh, semi-functional objects or functional objects like flower vases, I don't know, boxes, like little things that are decorative, but that can serve some function. And I don't ask anyone about what to do with those. Those are coming out of my
Mm-hmm.
head, and a lot of times that style of work, or that sort of category of work that I do, comes from my interest in traditional traditional forms and shapes and kinds of pieces, but it is my paraphrase of those traditional forms. So like shaker oval boxes, which is like a, I don't know if you know what that is.
No, I don't.
I don't think I have any in here, but or like, I don't know, flower vases, right? So like so it's a small bud vase that you would just put, like, clip something from your garden and put it in. That's not an uncommon thing to find. You can go find like 10 different styles of that at like Target or something, but you're not going to find one of these
No.
at Target, right? Um, so yeah, so there's that category of things that I make, which are answers to the question, what would I do if my job was to design this thing that a lot of people have in their house? Coffee canister, sewing boxes, flower vases, um, things like that, like
The
home decor stuff.
touchstone things you
Yeah,
interact with
yeah, yeah,
on a
yeah.
regular basis.
Right. Common everyday things that sort of become part of your environment at home. Um, so there's that stuff, and then there's artwork, original artwork, which is probably like the thing that I have the least ability to do, like the least flexibility for, because it takes a lot longer. Um,
What mediums are we talking with that?
Wood, still wood. I
Okay.
mean, mostly wood. I've recently been playing around with pastel on paper, but that's still just kind of a exploration, like personal, you know. I mean, you can see some of these things up here,
Okay.
and um, they're similar to, they share the look and feel of some of the things I carve in wood,
Yeah.
like this texture, this pattern on the flower vase is similar to this stuff in pastel, but that's not really. This is like, I don't know. I think of it as like studio experiments. Like when I have time, I usually am
No
experimenting
consequences
with.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So those are the kinds of things I make. I hope that answers your question.
It very thoroughly answered my
Good,
question.
good, good.
Kind of leads me to two other questions that I really like to ask. Um, does the blank page or an opportunity with no limits, does it infringe on your creativity, or does it just mean you can do whatever you want and you're totally comfortable with that?
Um, well, it doesn't really bother me, given like being given the no direction doesn't really bother me, because I can usually uh just extrapolate some sort of direction from, if somebody comes to me and they're like, "Oh, we want a piece from you," and they don't even know what kind. Let's say somebody's like, "Money's no object. We just really like your work. We want you to make something for our home."
Yeah.
Um, well, okay, like artwork, furniture, what? We like anything. We don't know. Like
Blank page.
total blank page. No, that doesn't bother me at all, because I have, I probably have some idea of something that I want to make that will fit what they're looking for, or I can figure out what they're looking for based on things that I like already want to make. And I usually do some degree of trying to get to know the person to give me some sort of context, and as soon
Right.
as there's some sort of context, I can build a little narrative off of that in my head that becomes some kind of framework for a series of decisions that leads me to, um, oh, well, you're gonna get a bathroom vanity and it needs to look like this, or like it sounds like you need a piece of artwork, or you know, I don't know, that could be anything. That could be them talking about like talking about the house that they just moved into or the renovation they just did or whatever, you know.
Yeah, because you don't know where that's going to come from,
I don't
but it's
know.
there. You just got to find it.
Yeah. So I'm pretty good at like creating that that context for myself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even if it's just a short bit of interaction with the client.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. I don't, it's never like given me any serious pause or trouble anyway. I've never had any, I have more ideas than I know what to do with, you know, usually. So
Yeah.
that is the hard part is finding the people who are basically able to pay what original work is worth because it takes so long, you know, like a piece of furniture, um, even if you are copying something that's kind of generic, you know, I'm like, none of us are IKEA. We don't operate at the economy of scale
Right.
that a corporation does,
No,
you know.
there's no way.
There's no way. So that is unfortunate, but that's just the way the world is, you know. At least is some, I think, letting people down easy sometime, especially friends who want to hire you. And like I was saying earlier, like your friends want to see you succeed, your community in general, like people like to see the others around them succeed and like, you know, be some kind of force in the world. And, but a lot of times with woodworking, that leads to somebody texting you and like, hey, thought of you, like I need a dining room table, like our budget is $600. It's like, buddy, so is mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like,
yeah, I had that scenario the other day.
I can't even get to the lumberyard and back for $600 for your dining room table.
Harsh
Which
reality
sucks.
of it. Yeah,
It
because you want to
sucks.
make the table
Of course
for
I
them.
do. Especially for them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I especially would want somebody I know who I'm certain that like the value is already there.
Mhm.
Like the sort of intangible value of the thing is already there.
Absolutely.
You know, so yeah, so it's locating, like connecting the dots between myself and the people who recognize some value in what I do, but who are also the kind of people who can pay for the work. So that's the challenge.
So, with more ideas than you can count, is there a ratio, or could you quantify some sort of ratio between the ideas you feel are genuinely yours versus the ideas that come to you out of the ether?
That's really hard to say.
You're right, it is. That's why I said
Yeah.
quantify.
Well, so in woodworking, and I think more generally in, if we're talking about, let's say, furniture, that's really muddy water because you're almost always operating within a template, a form template of something that has been done thousands and thousands and thousands of times.
Oh yeah, very established routines.
Yeah, I mean, if you get general enough, you want to talk about it in like extremely general terms, like everything is a platform or a box. You're making boxes and you're making platforms for people's stuff, for their butts, for their bodies,
for the box they put all those things in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Boxes for those boxes to go into, right? So,
yep.
Okay, so when that comes down to me deciding what the cabinet looks like that goes in the house in 4th and Gill, like the historic house or whatever, it becomes a little bit of a like a flavor mixing game. And I I feel like answering that question is like the question embedded in that is um what are what is the artist or craftsperson's particular tastes when it comes to mixing and matching things that already exist. And that set of tastes, that like profile of it's like what I like to cook and how I like to cook it.
Yeah.
You know,
That's the first time I've had a take explained to that question like that, and I really like that take on it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I it I have to think about things in that way because I don't I am extremely I don't know. I don't know how to put this. I'm extremely sensitive to the point of being allergic to what I feel like is artistic bullshit or bullshitting.
I'm so happy to hear that.
And more specifically, I mean people who are pretending that what they're doing doesn't come from some tradition, work that pretends it's made out of whole cloth. Almost nothing is not derivative in some way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not scared of being derivative. I'm scared of being derivative in a thoughtless way.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So
the intentionality of it is the important part.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I forgot exactly how you phrased your original question.
It's to quantify a ratio between ideas that you feel are yours versus what you feel comes to you.
Right. So I think that I don't know if I quantify it. I definitely don't quantify it in any sort of like really like strict way at all. I do think about things in I don't know. I guess I think this all sounds so vague without having an example to look at and analyze or something.
Yeah.
But like if somebody wants like a bathroom vanity and the rest of their life to me looks like a person with a particular kind of style, like they're into mid-century modern or they're into American, like super Americana, sort of like shaker style furniture, lots of painted wood, maybe decorations painted, like that sort of like country style or American, like peasant style. I might have different responses to both of those things, but I will probably not be it will be intentional in some way.
Yeah.
So again, this is like a vague answer or nebulous answer, but so that when it comes down to making, all that boils down to making a series of decisions about the thing that you're going to do. The thing that you end up delivering to them is the result of a series of decisions. And those decisions also can tell kind of a little story or a narrative. And I don't mean an explicit narrative. I don't mean like it's a puppet show or something, but you know what I mean? It's like
if you read between the lines, you can
right. So yeah, if you look at a piece, I'm just imagining a piece and there's this person lives in Fourth and Gill. They have a home that's on the list of certified historic homes. They have kept all the original woodwork or they've had it renovated. They have like some really nice mid-century modern pieces in one room, and then they have like a tastefully out of place I don't know, blanket chest from the early 18th century that's painted with like American frontier scene. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
can mix and match. That's kind of a pretty standard thing, I think, these days, is mixing and matching styles and eras. And so the cabinet that I would make for them, or the bed frame that I would make for them, might reference both of those things, while also, but it's going to reference them in a way that like makes sense in my head. So that is the original. There would be a seed of sort of original thought of how to stitch those different aesthetic elements together to get this thing that would hopefully tell some little story about that person's environment that they live in and about them. So
that is a really long way to answer that question, but I understand what you're telling me. It's you're being
it's
really
a hard question.
It is a hard question, and I ask it in a way that I hope people can easily answer, because it's like, hey, like, put a ratio on this,
right?
Because it's more difficult for some people than others, and that's also a range of answers that I've gotten to that question. So
I'm really good at making things more difficult than they need to be.
Does that find its way into your workflow often?
Yeah. Like everything I do, probably. Yeah. I kind of like, so I don't want things to look overworked, but I do, there's a lot of like multi-step processing that goes into a lot of the things I make, especially these days, because I'm playing around with color a lot more and surface texture, trying to be honest, right now I'm really sick of wood. Well, I'm sick of the look and feel of a lot of furniture, because I think that even if the design is clever, it still ends up looking predictable to me, because the surfaces are the same color. It's like the same 6 browns over and over again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love the medium of wood, because it is challenging. It is extremely versatile, but it also constricts you as a woodworker in lots of different, it is like by its nature constricting, because it breaks easily one way and not the other. It never stops moving. You can bend it, you can make it smooth, you can make it rough, you can carve it, you can whatever, run it through machines, leave tool marks on it, you can make it smooth, you can paint it, you can make it shiny, matte. Like, it's incredibly, it's a malleable medium that has like a very specific set of constraints. But most furniture still only presents you, the first glance that it presents you with is brown box, brown platform, beige, brown, whatever. You know what I mean? Maybe black in some really, rare instances, or crazy pattern. This piece of wood came from a tree that makes crazy patterns. That's what I get when I see a lot of woodworking. I'm like, oh, you made it a box with a brown wood and a beige wood.
So what gets your goat? What do you like to see when it comes to stuff like that?
That's a hard, maybe the hardest question to answer. It's like, I know it when I see it. There are really subtle ways to answer the question of how should this kind of piece be put together in wood? How should the material be treated? And what does the way the material is treated say about the form, say about the way it's used? I don't know how to answer that in a really general way. I don't think. I know it when I see it.
Yeah, and that's the best answer you can give me.
Right now, without, like diving down into like I don't know, like actual piece that we could analyze or
Right.
whatever. But I like I guess I could give you some general answers. Like I don't like things that are I don't know. I'm on Instagram a lot because I share my work there. I advertise classes. I advertise pieces that are for sale. It's like everybody's storefront now is
Hmm.
social media, right? So, and I'm pretty diligent about working the algorithm, sharing stuff, interacting with people, all that stuff. I also do it because I like doing it because I've met a lot of people I wouldn't have otherwise met all over the world, other
Hmm.
craftspeople, other artists. Um, I like seeing their work. I'm pretty like voracious in terms of my appetite for um, seeing what other people are doing. Some people are not. Some artists and craftsfolk like they don't want to be influenced by
Hmm.
what other people are doing. I'm kind of the opposite. Like I want to see it all,
Yeah.
you know? And so uh
Well, maybe a better or an easier question to answer was, what was the last thing you saw that really ticked the boxes?
yeah, God, I don't know. I don't know nothing that like usually it's these days it's not somebody working in wood. It's people working in other mediums.
Well, I mean, if that
Yeah.
fits the bill, then let's hear it.
Okay.
I'm curious.
So there's a ceramic artist that I really like named uh uh Hilma Cassell or Halima Cassell. She's in the UK. She does large sculptural vessels in clay, and some of them are just sculptural objects. They're not functional in any way, but they're carved, heavily carved. Their surfaces are carved with like pretty crazy patterns. But so she's doing something in a different medium that I do in my own medium, and but she's thinking in a way that that a woodcarver probably would not think because it's a different medium,
Right.
because the mediums sort of constrain you in different ways. So she's carving patterns that I might not have thought to carve in wood because she's carving them in ceramic.
Right. And that's a homogeneous uh, medium, right? Because
Yeah,
it's very
there's no
consistent all the
grain,
way through.
but it has its own. I'm not a ceramicist, but I know enough about it to know that it has its own set of constraints.
Right.
So you got to take it through certain processes to fix it, to make it the final product. Firing it sometimes more than one time, adding chemicals to the surface if you want the color.
Yeah.
Um, so she has her own set of constraints. I think I'm just gonna look up her work because
That,
I don't want to get her name wrong. Um, um, Halima Castle or Cassell. She does really cool stuff. Um, there's a guy. I think he's at Penland right now. Seth Gould. He's a metal worker. Really beautiful. From what I know about blacksmithing and metalwork, like pretty traditional um, um, ornamental style of metalwork. I like his work. These are just people that like are popping out of my head, like things that I saw last. Uh, there's a printmaker in France, and I don't know her name. I don't even know if I could find it, but she does embossed prints. They're usually not even, I guess you would call it printmaking. It's not even, they're not even colored. She's not even using ink. She's carving either wood or linoleum and then pressing paper into the carving to get these embossed
yeah. Neat.
drawings. Yeah, they're really beautiful. Um, my sister's an artist. I really like her work. Her name's Lauren Clay.
What's she do?
She's a sculptor and painter. She also makes wallpaper installations, so big, like full room wallpaper installations. Um, what else? I get inspired by my friends who make stuff. Like I like a lot of Josh Shory's
Hmm.
work. Alex Janes, who's a furniture designer in town, um, who he has a different take on. He does a lot of stuff with like pretty complex uh, geometry within a given form, like a stool, a chair, a table. Um, I don't want to make work that looks like either of their work, but I take inspiration from it because he will answer a question about the question of like what is a stool or what is a chair. He answers that in a very specific way.
Right.
And so that is one thing that I guess that I look for in other people's work is your piece pretending to be something other than what it is? And if it is, I'm usually less interested.
Josh had a really similar point the other day.
Really?
Yeah, he said if he likes things to present them as they are and what process they took to get there.
Yeah.
He was talking about a piece of a loom. I forget what he was calling it. It goes back and forth, carries the thread,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's a very um, contextually, you can see how all the pieces came together to
Yeah.
serve the purpose of the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And, sort of by that, what processes all of it was assembled in.
Yeah.
And it was very representative of what it is and what it does without any, you know, pretentiousness
Yeah.
or obfuscation.
Yeah. 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 Josh and I had talk about this kind of stuff a lot. And we arrive at different destinations, but I think we have similar attitudes um about a lot of things. I mean, uh funny enough, I think I end up in a place where I'm hiding the material a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
this
that's a
doesn't
painted surface.
it's a painted surface, but you might see it and think that it's a glazed ceramic surface.
To be honest, I did
Did you?
until I took a closer look at some of your work. I thought you were working in not wood.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm kind of sick of the look of wood at the moment. I mean, that probably won't last
Right.
forever. Um, but it's so that yeah, there are different ways to answer that question of like what is the piece? Um, and it's not, it's not an explicit language that goes into how something is designed. You don't get a list of bullet points with that piece that says, this is how I was designed.
Right.
This decision here means this. This decision here means this. You get a collection of visual cues that tell you, this, I am the piece that's preventing this from falling apart. I am the piece that's made out of the same material as the rest of it, but a different color because I've been painted. And maybe I've been painted for this reason, or I don't know. That's kind of silly, but
It exists. Like that stuff
yeah.
happens.
But so all of that adds up to this intangible thing that I don't know how to articulate, which is like why I like it or why I don't. Is it bullshitting or is it not?
Yeah.
Is it being honestly what it is, or is someone is it a gimmick? Is it like, I mean, I see a lot of this stuff on Instagram that I feel like work that was designed for designers, or
Mhm.
designed for like a showroom somewhere that is more clever than it is
Practical.
practical. Or even if it's trying to be practical, it's doing that in a way that's like just a little bit too self-aware and gimmicky
Yeah.
or something, and that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, I've seen, yeah, good job on being clever. I'm tired of seeing people be clever. If so, I don't know. I'm probably contradicting myself a little bit, but I like things that tell stories. I don't like things that necessarily uh, are too, I don't know, too proud of themselves or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think we all know what it looks like when something tries too hard to be something it isn't.
Uh-huh.
And we can smell it on something from a mile away.
Yeah.
Because if something is intentionally and genuinely made to be as it is for whatever purpose, then it's pretty clear that that's what it is for that purpose.
Yeah.
But
I think that anybody who thinks about this kind of stuff on a regular basis can pick up, has that radar. A lot of lay people do not.
Yeah.
And so
sensationalism gets them.
Yes. Yeah.
Sensationalism gets them real hard.
Hence the success of river tables. Do you know what river tables
are?
are?
Yeah, the split live edge stuff with the resin down. It's all sparkly, whatever, like Jeeps and fish and whatever. Yeah. I've seen them all.
I mean, it's a huge fad.
Well, resin in general has gotten a giant bump in popularity over like the last 6 years.
There are a whole lot of reasons I don't like those things. But yeah, it's amazing how many, those kind of fads and trends, they become the touch point for people who are not living and breathing craft in some way or art in some way. And so I get people sending me texts and Instagram messages and emails like, hey, I thought about you when I saw this guitar made out of colored pencils and resin. Like, great.
Thanks.
But that's, I don't know. Some people would say, well, you're just being a snob.
Well, it's nice that you thought of me, but I don't enjoy this.
I just let it ride, like I'm glad that they thought of me.
Because that's sweet.
There's not, right. I don't know. I'm a softie when it comes to, if somebody's like genuinely excited about something, I would rather just like not fight that.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
I'm super glad, like, that's cool. I didn't realize that you paid attention to woodworking. Check this out.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Or like, would you ever do something like this? Like, well, no, I don't work with resin because that's not really my medium. Here are the reasons I don't like it,
Right.
Like, try to talk them down gently.
Off the ledge of consumerism.
Yeah. Because it's not a sin to be excited about something that you don't understand.
Oh, absolutely not.
So I'm not going to be a dickhead about it, or try not to be.
Well,
I'll be a dickhead to people who should know better. Other woodworkers, and like there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of people who get caught up in those trends and fads, like the river table thing, because it is a turnkey operation.
Mm-hmm.
There are kits you can buy. Like, there are resin companies that are specifically marketing. And why wouldn't you? If you make resin or whatever, why wouldn't you market to the trend that's hot right now?
And also consumes a lot of your product.
So it's a little bit of both worlds of like, forgive them for they know not what they do, but also like, stop doing that to these beautiful fucking trees. Like, there's just gonna be all these tables that they look dated the moment they were made. It looks like the kind of thing that will definitely end up in somebody's man cave or whatever. Just like, they're ugly, they're tacky. They were already tacky the moment they were made. They're not going to get less tacky.
I've never walked into someone's house or restaurant and been like, damn, that's a really cool resin bar top.
Right. Yeah. So, the other, I don't know. The other thing about all that stuff is like, what does it do to the space that it's in? Context has a lot to do with whether something works or
Yeah.
not. Um, some things are made for some environments and not for others. I can't think of a environment that I would want to see a river table in, but maybe it exists.
You haven't seen it yet.
Right, I haven't. High gloss stuff in general, just like, man.
Yeah, it's not really my bag either.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I see in your work you have a lot of very flowy, organic, seemingly nature-inspired forms.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say you are intentionally derivative of in your work stylistically?
Can I use a bathroom before we do that? All right. I'll be right back.
Now, if I had sponsors,
Also, if you need to go.
it's I'm good. Thank you, though.
Do you need water or anything?
I would like a water, yes. Such a good host. This is a good time to tell y'all to, there was or should have been an advertisement for my sponsor at the beginning of the show, and do the thing that I told you to do, please, in that little advertisement. It really helps. And Podnuga Network stuff. The KAAMP is on the Podnuga Network, and that's nice. I also didn't do a lead-in on top of the show, so I guess I can do it now. Hello, everybody. This is the KAAMP, and I am Thomas Zachary. That is the Knoxville Area Artist Networking podcast platform thing. And we're here with Daniel Clay. I'm catching everybody up because I forgot to do this on the top side of the program.
Oh, okay. I'll be right back.
All right. And we're sitting around talking about stuff. And for the next few moments, I'm going to be quiet and enjoy this nice glass of water that I was so graciously gifted. Also, by the time this comes out, the Waverly Mural Jam will have happened, and I'm speaking about the future from the past, and I think I'll have a great time. Sean Williams / Heady Hardware will be my co-collaborator on this project, and I'm really excited to work with him. I'm sure we're going to turn out a really nice wall, and that'll be great. I'm super stoked. And then also Psych Show 3, which will have happened by the time this airs. It'll be an art show with some of East Tennessee's finest psychedelia on display at the Holistic Connection. I hope y'all saw it. If not, I'm telling you retroactively that you should be a little sorry you didn't see it. Because it's going to be a good time. I will record a podcast episode as a companion for my listeners to the art show and have input from all the artists involved. Hopefully, I think that's the plan. All right, so intentionally derivative things, stylistically speaking.
So you mentioned nature, and a lot of this one, if you go to my website or my Instagram page, you'll see this one texture or pattern that I've been carving a lot lately. Kind of like waves of little leaf shapes. And I think they probably did originally start as a way to represent leaves, like making a stylized carving, or a carving of a stylized tree or something. I don't really think about it that way now, because I kind of got interested in a different concept in that happens in nature, and in human perception. I mean, we're pattern makers, pattern recognizers, and a thing that I'm really interested in general, not just with that texture or pattern, but in general, is the gray area between things that are regular and irregular, or strictly, rationally patterned and random. And so trees are a good they're a good case study, because we can recognize what a pine tree looks like. Even if you didn't see the trunk, if all of the tree disappeared except for the needles, you would recognize it still as a pine tree, or an oak, or whatever. You pick your tree, in part because of the shape of the leaf or the needle or whatever, but also because of the shapes formed by multiple leaves and needles, right? So there is a pattern to that, but you might never have thought about it in terms of the way you think of a pattern, like a weaving pattern. Like a weaving pattern is binary. It's like the thread is over or under the thread next to it, and or you take something like, I don't know, like the simplest binary pattern that we use in ornamental work, like a checkerboard or a zigzag or something, where you have a very simple shape that's repeating, or two versions of a simple shape that's repeating on a grid, right? So you have a left and right and up and down 2-axis grid, or even more complex grids like radially symmetrical grids, or something like that. So all those things, those are like very discrete, rational patterns. But there are patterns that are not so easily discernible from randomness. And that interests me. I mean, it fascinates me. I think it's part of what keeps us looking at nature, is because there's something there to discern, like what gives the oak tree its oak tree-ness. Like, why do those leaves clump in the way they do? Why do the branches branch in the way they do? It's different. I can see it's different from the way a willow tree does that same thing. So it has, each of those different species have a different sort of design conceit embedded in them, right? So in terms of what I'm doing with carving that particular pattern, I'm figuring out what my personal design conceit is for how those leaves are arranged and oriented and change.
Is this a scenario where you're adding order to chaos or chaos to order?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So I don't draw. So when you look at those things that I've carved with that texture, most of the time, almost all the time until just recently, when I've been playing around with sort of like doing things a little bit different, but for the past few years at least, I don't draw anything out ahead of time. I prepare the piece, which is made out of wood, whether that's a panel or a flower vase or some other object or something. I get it ready to carve, and I just start carving without any layout, without any drawing or planning. And so it's developing, the pattern is developing organically, insofar as I'm not planning ahead, right? So by analogy, Um, however, the tree is deciding to put a leaf here and a leaf here and a leaf here and a leaf here. That's the same thing that I'm doing. The tree isn't conscious of what it's doing. And to some degree, neither am I.
So would you say like recently this has become more of a like moving meditative practice or like
It's definitely meditative.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and I'm also thinking less and less about the individual marks and more about um, mm, the composition created by um, all of those little decisions in aggregate. Um, yeah, so it's not really about imitating nature. It's not about representing nature anymore. It's more about like trying to embody um, the way something in nature, like a tree, um, develops a texture that has the quality of both something that is patterned and chaotic.
That makes perfect sense. I enjoy that answer quite a bit. Um, do you, when you're looking at these things, do you have, do you struggle when it's time to stop, or do you know when it's time to stop? Do you hit a point where you're just like, this is appropriate? That these shapes play in a way that I would like to see.
There are times when I know exactly when to stop, and then more often there are times where I am afraid I've gone too far, and that's what makes me stop. And then after some time away from it, like gain a little perspective, stop looking at it for a few days, whatever, I'll come back and be like, okay, I was 89% correct that was the time to stop. But there are just a couple little spots that I can now see this thing with some distance from it that I know I'm done except for this, this, and this, and now I'm done.
I have a similar point in my work. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've made up. I was talking to Joshua about this. I've made up this sort of logic in my head about my work where it's like, is the detail inherently packed into this space enough? Whatever the enough is, like, is this design dense enough for whatever area it may take up? You know? So I come to a spot where there's either just the right amount of interplay between positive or negative, or if I touch it again, I'm scared I'm going to mess it up.
Yeah.
So, like, I either find a happy medium or I'm just like, you know, and then that's when I put it down, give it some space, look at it again next week or something.
Yeah.
And if I genuinely can't find the next logical thing to do to it in whatever way I'm thinking about it, then I'll stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I do something similar, I think. I go through a similar, series of thoughts about things. There are times when I know ahead of time, there are pieces that I've done. I don't have any handy to show you, but you've probably seen some of them on my Instagram or website where I'm filling up the entire thing, whether it's a panel or whatever. And so in one sense, it's like the available space. If I'm going to cover every square inch of something, I know when it's going to be time to stop.
Yeah, that's a very obvious goal.
Right. It's very obvious. Yeah. And also, because of the nature of the material, the medium, there's no erasing.
Oh, absolutely not.
So it's like once I make that mark, it's there to stay. So I do a lot of stepping back and hemming and hawing over things and trying to forget what I've done. Again, that's different than if I were drawing, if I'm carving something that is like a super traditional pattern that's rosettes and flowers and borders and things like that, that just, I might still develop it as I go, but there's a lot less groping, like internal groping that goes along with it.
Well, you have pretty clear expectations, I would imagine, for whatever that would be.
Yeah.
Because you're using patterns that have already been used in certain ways and executed in forms that are well established.
Yeah. And I might do something original with those, or I might do some, maybe it's not original. Somebody probably has thought of it before, but I'll put some kind of like little aesthetic spin on something, even within the scope of a very folky traditional carving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's not the same. It's not the same process exactly. So I can do that faster. Whereas this stuff that I've been working on recently is, like it's not to beat the tree metaphor to death, but it's more like I'm growing the pattern than I am designing it. And I'm growing it one little leaf at a time and one clump of leaves at a time. But I don't have the, unfortunately, unlike trees, I am burdened with anxiety and
we don't know trees don't have anxiety yet.
That's you could be right.
But for what you're saying.
Right. Like unfortunately I'm self-aware and self-conscious and conscious of what I'm doing, conscious of being conscious of what I'm doing. And so the only way that I have found to try to become unaware of what I'm doing is distance.
Mm-hmm.
So I work a little bit and I stop looking at it and I try to forget. If I had a direction in mind, some of that, it's like a negotiation between, I definitely want this piece to do this, but I don't know how I want it to do this. And I don't want to plan how I want it to do this. I just want to see if it can develop that way, sort of in spite of myself.
So the way I interpret this is that you have a very rigid workflow up front, crafting the shapes of whatever it is you're going to carve on. So that's like the majority of the planning and the and the the hard decisions.
Yeah.
And then you get to sit down with whatever the vessel is or whatever the work piece is, and then do the organic things.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm doing it with a knife, and the like whatever color medium I'm using or whatever, but it is a little bit like if I have well, it's not a little bit like it. It is at least some of the time there's a mental image that is vague and I'm describing it one little decision at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have, I'm not quite smart enough to describe it ahead of time and draw it out first.
Right.
So I'm describing it by doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I would have to say in some ways that my creative practice is really similar. I mean, I set the constraints of this is the size panel I'm going to work on. This is the base coat of color I want to contrast with. And then I want these 3 to 12 colors to play with. And then anything inside that is just decisions made in the moment as they go,
I didn't know that you were a painter.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about me being intentionally derivative.
Okay.
So me being intentionally derivative looks like my inspirations being automotive culture between the 40s and the 70s.
Okay.
So I really dig early 40, 50, 60s Bonneville salt flats, hot rod, minimalist rat rod stuff. And then on top of that, you also have the Southern California car culture with all the crazy cartoony characters and rat fink and pinstriping. And then you also have on the flip side of that, all the Latin car culture with the lowriders and the psychedelic paint jobs and the metal flake and more pinstriping. So all of those things as a whole of car culture find their way into my work, but it's not in a way that someone who isn't innately familiar with those pieces of contextual art adjacent to society
Yeah.
would pick it up.
Hmm.
Other people think it's just really really complex geometry things. But a lot of the shapes and assembly of shapes are very directly inspired by automotive pinstriping.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll show you later, but
okay. Do you call yourself a deconstructionist?
I suppose I could if
Yeah.
that's the lens I want to use on it.
Yeah.
But I say I'm a geometric artist more than anything, because there are lines of symmetry to my work, even if the patterns themselves aren't wholly symmetrical. Like I will alternate 2/4 of a bilateral symmetry, and then I will make different interruptions in radial symmetry pieces in certain places, but they'll be symmetric. They just won't be symmetric to the pattern as a whole.
Gotcha.
So I'll have the same interruptions in the same places, like opposed to each other in some way. But yeah, those inspirations to me are blatantly obvious, and I've seen people pick it up as blatantly obvious. But then I'll ask those people, like, "What do you drive? What's your weekend car?" You know, and they'll be like, "Oh, I have a '67 Dodge Challenger or something like that." And I'm like, "Got it." Like, you know what you're looking at. Yeah, and it's the people that know what they're looking at telling themselves really quick.
Yeah.
And I enjoy that because I enjoy those people. But the inspiration there is more distilled into my work as a set of shapes and ratios and colors that I want to see, more so than I'm trying to copy automotive artwork on my canvas. You know?
Yeah. So it's a design vocabulary,
but different application totally.
Right.
So
I feel the same. I mean, because I work in a like a the medium and the tools that I use are part of a craft tradition
that have been very established for a long time.
And there is a relatively narrow basket of aesthetic applications for those tools and materials that are integrally related to the tools and materials themselves. So the tools, like the knives that I use to carve, they work really great to carve certain shapes and shapes with certain qualities. And so I let them be what they are, but I apply those qualities of those shapes in what I do in a way that isn't traditional.
Yeah.
Really. So
you catch a lot of flack from traditional woodworkers and carpenters, or
no?
Oh, you would love to see some of the messages I've gotten for posting this stuff.
I
like
bet.
The hardcore car guys are just like, "What are you doing on a panel canvas? You fuck, You're supposed to be doing it on a sheet of steel." That kind of stuff. I've been told all sorts of things.
I'm sure
it's old car guys.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of old woodworking guys too. I don't know. What kind of flack do I catch from woodworkers, if any?
Well, if this is how you have to like think about it, it's essentially zero.
I get weird. So when I do the traditional stuff, the weird messages that I get will be things like, they're weird because they don't know I mean, this may be always the case. Maybe they don't know as much as they think they do. So, I carve some pattern and someone will be like, "Oh, well, if you're going to carve things from Romania, you should tell people that you're doing Romanian wood carving." And I'm like, "Well, okay, you in Romania have this pattern because somebody in Mycenae did it 1700 years before Christ."
Right.
And that is why your pattern in Romania looks the same as the ones in Iraq and in Russia and in, wherever, India, like these things have traveled all over the world, and they probably originated independently all over the world in some cases. because people like patterns, and because these traditional patterns are made out of simple shapes like circles and triangles and crosses and squares and grids and, simple borders around rectangular boxes, because people have been making rectangular boxes decorated with circles all over the place. It's a thing that people do and have always done. And a lot of these things may be like the the design equivalent of what convergent evolution. Like dolphins that originate in different parts of the world, they have the same shaped nose. Like that's just the way that nature solved this problem, and it solves it here the same way that it solves it here. Okay, in the same way, like people figured out how to draw circles all over the place, and once you draw a circle, you're going to draw another circle, and you're going to draw another circle, and you're probably going to figure out that if like these 3 circles interlock in this particular way, I get this repetition, this pattern that's really cool. And and like basically you're not special. Like somebody else is going to figure that out too by just through
doing the
experimentation and the same pattern recognition that triggers whatever it is in our brain that wants to make and recognize patterns. So all that to say, like that's some of the weirdness that I get is like people being like, oh, that's these are Saudi Arabian patterns. These are Saudi patterns. And it's like, well, you're not wrong.
But they're also
just universal patterns. I don't really get any flack from woodworkers.
This already sounds like a luxury.
Yeah. I don't know, like weird things like how to sharpen the knives. Like people get religious about little, things like that. Like
yeah, they do.
What kind of tool? What kind of use water stone or diamond stone? It's like I don't know. What difference does it make?
The one that works, the one that I have.
Yeah. I could use either. Like, so that kind of weird, like gear hound nerd shit.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. I mean, they are really specialized tools. People get super nerdy about specialized tools. I mean, I get really nerdy about specialized vehicles, so I can't really it's the same shit.
I have the added benefit in chip carving of being able to show people things that existed a long time before mass-produced goods existed. So it's like, the OGs were using things that you would consider garbage tools. Like, so maybe don't worry about the tool so much. Like you should learn how to use it really well.
Yeah.
If you're gonna carve, like learn how to get something really sharp. But, no one was teaching those people were not buying things from catalogs.
No.
They're making it, and they're making it up.
Or they learned to make it from somebody and then went home and did it themselves.
Right, and then came up with like one tiny little change that improved it a little bit better or whatever. So, yeah, I get weird comments like that sometimes, but mostly it's all, pretty friendly.
All right, I'm going to touch base with you real quick.
Yeah.
We're at an hour 20. You still good?
Oh, yeah, I probably need to wrap it up soon-ish. Sometime soon-ish. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll give you 2 more questions and then we can call it. What does a good creative day look like for you? If you could describe one, they're not all the same.
Okay. They're not all the same. I don't know. What does a good creative day look like? I'm usually juggling a lot of different projects, so just checking things off a ever evolving, lengthening list.
Is that it?
I actually stopped using that thing because
I point at the blackboard across the room here.
Yeah, I've actually been meaning to take that down because I just realized I stopped paying attention to it.
Well, happy to remind you, I suppose.
Yeah.
But productivity, checking off the list.
Yeah, just like pushing the various projects I have going ahead. I know when I get something done, I have days where I'm sure everyone's like this, like where I feel like I'm working a ton and it doesn't feel like there's anything to show for it.
Yeah.
But I like it when I try to go into the shop or the studio with clear objectives and um, uh, there's like I'm a slacker if I don't get these things at least done, and then I'm doing really well if I get this far beyond that, and then sometimes I get more than that done and it's gravy,
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, just try to be productive.
All right, what's the notepad in your phone look like?
Notepad on my phone, it's a total mess. It's
Joshua's is very, very organized.
of course it is.
I had to ask, since he was so adamantly on top of his in the way that it is organized.
Yeah, that's so weird. If I'm in the middle of a big project, like a project with like a lot of contingencies or something like that, I don't use the notepad on my phone. I use an app called Workflowy, which is just it just gives you a set of nested lists. You can create nested lists. So, make the thing, paint the thing, carve the thing, make the thing, go to the lumberyard, mill the wood, cut the dovetails, whatever, paint the thing, mix the paint, apply the paint, test the paint, whatever. You know what I mean? So I do break things down when I have a lot to do. I break things down like that, but I don't know. The notepad is like a mix of like short to-do lists that are like just today, like I have to get this done today, or I need to pick this up at Home Depot, and like I'm on my way to Home Depot right now, so I need to make a list. Draft texts and emails, random thoughts. Totally just
a little bit of everything.
It's a junk drawer. It's not organized.
That's my favorite answer.
Okay.
I like the junk drawer because I'm also the junk drawer type. Like today, I was walking around at work between Zamboni runs, and I was just like, oh man, I got this really cool idea for a painting. And I stopped right then and wrote 6 or 8 words about it, and then drew with my finger.
I never do the drawing in the notepad.
Well, I don't put a whole lot of stock in it, but it does pair well with the words when I can give if I can give the vocabulary a visual form. If I can get those two tied together, I can usually go back later and be like, that's exactly it. It's more advantageous for me to do both because I can tie them together as a whole idea visually with the words. And I can just come back in later and pick up where I had left off with writing down the idea. And that's pretty consistent for me.
If Josh was here, I would bust his balls a little bit and tell him that his notebook is his notes app is organized because he's more scared of death than I am.
What a ballsy thing to say. I'm so here for it.
He knows that I would say that to his face, so it's not a big deal. We definitely we share an enjoyment for
the dark humor,
poking at people a little bit. So yeah.
All right. So last question: if you were to pick one or a few people to sit in your chair, who would you like to listen to on the podcast?
They have to be Knoxville people.
They can be regional.
Okay.
I like to keep it at the most regional, but not necessarily Knoxvillian per se.
Okay. Well, let's see. You could talk to there's a printmaker in Nashville named Laura Basden. She's really good at what she does. She's very traditional in the way that she does it. She doesn't do any digital design. She draws things by hand. She carves all of her blocks by hand. She uses vintage wood type for all of her typesetting. She works in the Americana music world a lot, doing show posters and other design stuff for like Gilliam Welch and Chris Stapleton and other folks like that. She would be a good person to talk to. Who else? Does it have to be somebody who makes things, or?
I keep the umbrella pretty wide, so if they're a
Okay.
creative person.
Creative.
Yeah.
Do you know, Steven, I'm blanking on Steven's last name. He'll be offended. Friedlander.
Yeah, I actually met him recently, and I would like to
you
have a
should
sit
talk to
with
Steven
him.
Friedlander. He's fascinating guy. Really interested in Knoxville and the arts.
Yeah, he spent an hour or so picking my brain a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we have lunch every once in a while, and Steven's great to talk to.
Yeah, I enjoyed the bit of conversation we had, for sure.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Yeah, him and Laura would both be good folks. Alex Janes in Knoxville, furniture maker, who used to, I think Alex studied industrial design, and I know he worked for a while for a company that was contracted by NASA to work on the shuttle project in Huntsville, Alabama.
Neat.
So he's got some cool background that he brings to furniture making.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, and the last thing I'm gonna ask you to do is ask you to tell people where they can find you on the internet.
Probably the best way to keep up to date with what I'm doing is Instagram, because I use it pretty frequently. And on Instagram, I'm at Daniel Clay, all one word, no underscores or anything like that. And you can also check out my website, which is danielclaywoodworking.com. Again, no spaces, underscores, or anything. Those are definitely the best places.
Sweet. And you've got contact forms and emails and all the stuff on the website. So
lots of links.
Plenty of easy ways to get a hold of you if you want some work. Everybody, this has been the latest episode of the KAAMP. That is the Knoxville Area Artist Network and Platform podcast thing. And this is a fun conversation.
Yeah.
Daniel, thank you very much for meeting me in the middle and answering a yes kindly to a stranger on the internet.
You're very welcome. It was great.
And we will get at you next time, everybody. Thank you very much.